Okay.
Thanks.
There you go.
I was a nice person to let my sighted helper go shop for an hour.
Yeah.
Just because I was I used to be able to do this stuff on my own at one point, and she wants to buy some stuff for her husband. I was trying to be nice.
So she's looking for swag on the show floor.
Yeah, and then she's not going to be back Saturday, and I was like, no, I got the interview and hang out with the entire cast of X-Men the Animated Series with our help. So she deserves to do a little bit of alone time.
Yeah.
But what's the difference, say, between making a video game and creating a comic book?
Well, I mean, and I've also written screenplays for movies, like the Prince of Persia movie, which was an adaptation of the Ubisoft video game. I was the first screenwriter for that. So that was yet a third medium. And they're all forms of storytelling, but they're very different in that, movies are linear, and once you've made the movie, it's the same for everyone, right?
Yes.
You quit, but the games you're kind of creating a universe that people can explore and discover in their own way. Players will do different things within the game world, so it's almost like you're the architect of the building, and that you're creating a place, which has a story which players will discover in their own way. So graphic novels are interactive in the sense that when everybody who reads it will read it in their own way, and I guess it's got to be. Of course, there's the dialogue and there's the narration.
Yep.
There's the visual aspect. There's the layout of the page. So it's again, you're kind of inviting the reader to discover it, in their own way. Nobody reads in the same way.
Exactly.
So it's you could say it's interactive in a way. Reading a book is people read at different speeds. Some people like to read a book in big chunks. Others like to read a page at a time and then digest. You can go back, and so that's all. I mean, there's common elements to storytelling in all those forms, but it's the specifics of the craft are very different.
That's fascinating. Getting back to Replay, how emotionally draining was it to tell this type of a story? 3 generations of your family. I think it's beautiful that you're able to get that, on paper and into the world. Especially since it goes from World War I to World War II to present day like that.
It was it was a very, it's in some ways a very emotional project to do. I didn't find it unpleasant. It was at times it was almost cathartic.
Mm-hmm.
There were some tough things in there, but I think overall it was a very healing experience. It was also a way to kind of get closer to what my dad's and grandparents' experience had been. And of course, I grew up hearing their stories. A lot of families, the generation that lived through a war or trauma just don't want to talk about it, and the kids can't find out anything.
Yes.
So I had the good luck that both my dad and my grandparents and my great aunt were very willing to talk about what they'd experienced, to share their stories. And so the book is kind of partly about the experience of growing up, hearing those stories, but also having the feeling that what that generation had lived through is so much more dramatic and consequential than anything that I might do. I mean, whatever, I like comics, I'm making video games. What's that compared to escaping from the Nazis, and saving the family? So, but I think a lot of second generation immigrants and children of refugees sort of have that feeling that just had it so easy, by comparison. But by doing this book, it was a reason to kind of keep calling my dad on the phone. He's 93 now and still in good health. And
God bless him.
Sharp, he's got incredible memory. And I was in France, and because I was writing this and drawing this book during the pandemic, in part, it wasn't easy to travel back to New York to see my family for about a year there.
It was a ghost town here during the pandemic.
Yeah, and in France, there was lockdown. There were times when it was. And it just didn't make sense to try to travel, so we were sort of stuck on opposite sides of the ocean. And but this book was a reason to kind of pick up the phone often and call my dad and ask him to sort of reminisce about these things that happened to him when he was 7, 8, 9 years old in occupied France. And also for me, because I was in France, which is the country that he had that experience in, it also in a way helped to connect me to the history of the place where I was. Like at one point, when the pandemic ended and I was able to take the car and drive, I drove up the coast of France and I visited the towns that my dad had been in as a child in 1939, 1940. Le Touquet, across the English Channel and close to Dunkirk. I mean, he and his aunt were caught in the Blitzkrieg, the German invasion, and you've seen the movie Dunkirk.
Yeah.
That's where they were. And then when, that became unsafe, they went further south to a little fishing village called La Bernerie. And again, every time sort of one step ahead of the Gestapo, they were, my dad had to hide. He couldn't go to school, as a Jewish kid in France. He couldn't, they would have gotten rounded up. So they ended up in Nice, which was in the unoccupied zone. And so all these details of French history and the character of the different places, it was a chance for me to kind of find my footing in France too, and also connect with my dad, because in remembering these things and talking to me about them, he would then remember other things, and there was sort of an emotional layer that I kind of, I felt like having to draw these experiences, I could connect better with what it might have been like for him, and even more so with my grandfather, because he passed away. He was a doctor in Brooklyn, but I knew that he had been a soldier in the First World War. But as a kid, at 10 years old in New York, I didn't really know what the First World War was. So finding out now, and then researching to be like, wait, so when he said, and then the Russian wave attacked the trenches and everybody had to run away. Doing the research, okay, now I have a sense of to draw it, to realize the magnitude of the things that he was describing.
I really can't wait to have my reader read this to me now.
I wish you could see the pictures.
I'm sure they're awesome. And once I get the meta glasses back, because right now I'm with an amazing medical lab up the street, I'm testing meta glasses to see how they improve the lives of people with visual impairments. And after round 3 of the study, I'm buying a pair for myself, because it's the closest thing I'll have to a cure for the immediate future. Like if I say meta look, it will tell me everything that's on the page of a comic book.
Wow, so that's almost like an alternative to having a reader, with you to describe what's on the page and answer questions.
It's not perfect, but I can't always I read someone be in my eyes 24/7, so this was pretty sweet.
Yeah.
So I cannot wait to be checking this out. This is out now?
Yeah, so Replay is published by First Second Books. This is the English edition of Replay. There's the First Second, it's a division of Macmillan. And in France it's published by Delcourt. And then and my website at jordanmechner.com has kind of all the links of where people can find it, and also it has a lot of behind-the-scenes information, both about Replay and making the book, the historical research, the family stories behind it, and also archival stuff about making video games back in the 80s, and Prince of Persia, and The Last Express.
How has the video game evolved from the days of Apple II now?
I mean, it was kind of a very small fringe thing at the time that was just beginning. I was 13 when I got my first Apple II computer. When I sort of made the big switch from comics to programming, and my friends and I who were into programming, none of the adults really knew what that was, or knew what computers were good for, or how playing games, connected with that. And of course now everybody knows. Video games are part of the mass culture, and there's movies adapted from games, TV series, The Last of Us, the latest greatest example, and
Fallout, which I still haven't checked out yet. But
and so everybody plays games in some way. Even people who aren't gamers play some kind of games, on their phone, and those are.
Can we just agree that Candy Crush is not a game?
I've never played it. no.
All right, never mind.
I play Wordle. Is that a game?
That's. I stopped. It was too addicting. There's a train game on Facebook that I was addicted to for a while.
Yeah. No, I mean that's one difference is that games are it's such a huge universe now and so much part of the culture. But the other thing is that game development has become like a whole industry. So a big budget, like what we call a AAA game today, is like 1,000 people work on it, and the budget can be like $200 or $300 million, like more than a big budget Hollywood movie. Which, I mean, that the size of the biggest projects has been increasing, over the last few decades. But again, we still have a very vibrant indie game, community, and it's still possible for one person or a small group of people to make a game for almost no financial cost other than time, as we did back in the 80s. So the game industry really embraces all of these things now, and that's one big difference.
That's awesome. Where can my audience find you online?
You can find me at jordanmechner.com, and that's my website with like links to all the new projects, the new graphic novels, the behind the scenes, the making of, and the old video games. And that's also where I announce if I'm going to be doing, starting a new project or appearing at an event, like this comicon.
All right. Thank you for spending some time with Awesome Sauce Radio, and this was a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Glad I'm out. Can you just hit stop? Yeah.